And we begin tonight with breaking news from Uvalde, Texas. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Marnie Hughes. For the very first time since the horrific school shooting that killed 19 children and 2 teachers, the school police chief, Pete Arredondo, is sharing his side of the story through his attorney tonight. This all comes as the Uvalde School Board is meeting right now as we speak to decide the chief's fate. The district superintendent has already recommended that Arredondo be fired. Arredondo's attorneys say his client's constitutional rights are being violated. He is the one that was the head of Texas public safety, pointed the finger at from the very beginning. Also, more criticism came when it was revealed that law enforcement did not enter the classroom where the gunman was for more than an hour that day. Tonight, Chief Arredondo is pushing back in a 17-page press release through his legal team. He is detailing what he knew when he was making those decisions in the hallways of Robb Elementary School and why he says he has become a scapegoat for the tragedy that unfolded that day. His attorneys say that when the gunfire started, Chief Arredondo knew that students or employees in rooms across the hall could be in serious danger, and he decided to evacuate those rooms at the time. He writes, would the district have preferred a gunfight with officers in the hallway to break out again? And during that firefight, say 20 or 30 children across that hall are killed. And what if some of them were killed by police officer fire? Chief Arredondo did the right thing. I'm going to be going through this statement with Chief Chris Van Gailey, who responded to the Sandy Hook shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. First, though, correspondent Marky Martin live in Texas tonight with more on that school board meeting that is happening right now. Marky, and first of all, is Chief Arredondo even at this meeting tonight?
Yeah, Marnie, he is not. And you bring me to my top point, and that is tonight in that school board audience, parents doubly outraged and upset that Chief Arredondo did not show up this evening. As you mentioned, his attorney releasing that 17-page statement citing reasons as to why his client would not be there, citing death threats that the chief has received, the possibility that violence could, break out at tonight's meeting, overall saying that his client does not feel safe. And the response from parents tonight, now you know how we feel.
They had more equipment, more firepower, more experience. Why in the world did they not go in?
It's the question nearly everyone who's seen the surveillance video is asking. Why did more than 300 heavily armed police officers respond to Robb Elementary and then wait in the hallway for more than an hour?
We had our first state trooper there at 2 minutes, 28 seconds. 91 in total were on scene. There was a Texas Ranger in that hallway on the phone with his supervisors for 15 or 20 minutes.
Tonight, the fate and future of Uvalde's District Police Chief Pete Arredondo lying in the hands of the school board. In a damning July investigative report on the tragedy, Arredondo was criticized for failing to take charge of the scene, not breaching that classroom sooner, and wasting time looking for a key to a likely unlocked classroom door. For 90 days, parents have asked for accountability. Texas Senator Roland Gutierrez says firing Arredondo would be the right thing to do, but there is widespread blame.
It's bigger than that. We have to look at the Department of Public Safety. We have to look at the state, the federal police. We have to look at the sheriff's office and the police department. Accountability doesn't just stop with a local cafeteria school cop.
And Marnie, we are working to get you fresh sound from tonight, but I will tell you, parent after parent, even a child went up to that lectern tonight to address that school board, asking for accountability. I will also mention, too, at one point, after the school board heard from a few parents, they sent it into closed session. So taking it behind the curtain, it was no longer public. One father got up to that lectern saying, do not take this into closed session. We deserve to hear. Our babies are dead. Our teachers are dead. Our parents are dead. The least you can do is show us the respect and do this in public, which they did not. Now, at this time, we still do not have a final word of Chief Arredondo's fate. And lastly, Marnie, I also wanted to mention one little girl who had friends killed that day on May 24th inside Robb Elementary went up bravely to that podium and said, I have a message for Pete Arredondo and all of the police there. Turn in your badge. You did not deserve to wear it. Marnie.
A lot of pain, emotion, and really fear and frustration in that room tonight. All right, Marky, we'll be checking back in with you again just to update you on the situation. Breaking news, Chief Arredondo has released through his attorneys a 17-page statement, essentially a press release giving his side of the story that day and the events that unfolded, and really a look into his decision-making, which has come under fire as the officials in Uvalde tonight consider his future and his fate. I want to welcome in Chief Chris Van Gailey with the Plainville Police Department. He was formerly with the Newtown, Connecticut force and responded to the attack at Sandy Hook in 2012. And the chief has been our guest multiple times speaking about the situation in Uvalde. Chief, as always, good to have you back. I want to go through some of what Chief Arredondo released through his legal team tonight, starting with setting the scene for the decisions that he made. He said, quote, "It is important to note that Chief Arredondo, along with several other officers in the hallway, were completely unaware of any occupants in the room with the shooter until entry was made. The shooter was engaged and the officers stopped him." This brings into question, Chief, the 911 calls that we now know were coming from kids inside the room with the shooter. What do you make of this particular statement and the chief putting this forth tonight?
Well, thanks for having me, Maria. I mean, I got about halfway through that 17-page document before I had to stop reading it because I was so upset. You know, the fact that these aren't even his words, it is an attorney speaking on his behalf, making excuses for his client. It's sickening. And as far as, you know, his excuses go, when he was in the hallway, the reason that he didn't know, I mean, you would assume if it's a day of school and you haven't seen any other children exit, that room's going to have children in it. You know what the easiest way to do is to check? Is you actually go into the room and try to open the door. And obviously he did not. But the whole thing is full of excuses, and it's just amazing. And you talk about him not being at his hearing. You know, his attorney said that there were death threats and he was afraid to be there. And because he was on administrative leave, he wasn't allowed to carry his firearm. And he wanted his firearm in the hearing with him, which is ironic, being that he had a firearm with him and he didn't use it when he was at the school. So clearly he doesn't know how to use a firearm or doesn't want to use it. So what difference does it make if he had one or not? Well, he should have been there to look those parents in the face and try to explain to them why it was not his fault.
Right. And this is the first time, really, Chief, that we're hearing his point of view through this statement. So until now, that's where a lot of the criticism has come. I want to share with people at home a couple more things that he said. He points the finger at the district in this statement for not doing more, saying if certain things had happened, then this could have ended much differently. He said if the district had installed key card operating door access, if an officer had arrived sooner, if the district had a 6-foot fence around the school, if employees kept the doors locked like they're supposed to, if radios worked inside the classroom, if the school had extraction tools available to police. Are those valid points that he says he made a year in advance prior to this shooting?
It's sickening that he's going to try to put the blame elsewhere. You know, his attorney made it clear that you can't blame God and you can't blame the shooter. So they're looking for a scapegoat, and that's Chief Arredondo. You know, I'm sorry, but I fail to believe how he can even think he's going to get his job back. And if he feels, you know, committed to law enforcement, like he says in that letter, then he would just go away instead of trying to fight this and put blame on the school system. You know what? We could be using flintlock guns. You know, what if the shooter was never born? I mean, how many excuses can you come up with to try to not take blame onto yourself when clearly you're the one who was in charge and you failed to do the most obvious thing, which is go in the room and address that shooter. Yes, those items in and of themselves should be a part of any school district's school security when you look at it from a whole. But you know what? If that shooter wanted to get in there, he would have found a way in, unfortunately. That's why it takes armed, trained officers with the courage and the backbone and the honor to go in there and face that shooter gun to gun.
He also talks about leadership, Chief, and I want to pull up, this is for my team in the control room, the next one. If leading from the front after being shot at, calling for support, keys, extra tools, SWAT, a sniper taking action to save teachers and students located in the surrounding classrooms shows lack of leadership, then who knows what leadership is supposed to look like. You were in Sandy Hook. You are a chief now in a different department. What does leadership look like when it matters the most, when lives are on the line?
You know, leadership is something which can be completed by anybody of any rank. You know, that's all I had said on the previous show. Chief Arredondo isn't the only one, you know, that should stand to lose their job over this. Any officers that sat there and watched him and didn't do their job that they knew they should do because, you know, somebody of a higher rank was telling them to slow down or stop, you know, they should have been leaders. They should have stepped up. You know, but the things he did, so what? He didn't do the most obvious thing. You know, when he was getting gunfire thrown at his way, he ran. You're supposed to go to the gunfire. And if he wanted to retreat, regather, grab all the other officers, you know, use some of those shields, you know, maybe somebody had more firepower than him. If he could get more guns together, that would have taken maybe merely 60 more seconds for him to do it. But they waited outside, you know, over 70 minutes. There's no excuse. The fact he's trying to make one is absolutely disgusting. And at this point, he has no honor left.
Finally, Chief, another point that he made that struck me, he focuses specifically on active shooter training, saying that he did follow protocol that day. So I want you to add some clarity to this statement. He said, while the talking heads ask slanted questions to get a controversial soundbite, let me be clear, all the chief's actions, again, this is from the attorney representing the chief, are consistent with active shooter training. In active shooter situations where ongoing deadly force is reasonably likely to be employed by a suspect and delay in taking law enforcement action could result in injury or death, immediate action by officers at the scene is necessary when those actions are deemed reasonable. So I guess the question here is, he's saying at that time the actions were not deemed reasonable based on the facts that he had of the threat. How do you read this? You know, if the excuse he's making is I had no idea there were children in there, and so therefore, you know, it's somebody we could just leave in there forever and we'll just walk away and he'll eventually fall asleep and we'll go in there and, you know, cuff him up when he's asleep. I mean, it's a school. There's children in every single room there. The fact you didn't check the door, you didn't look through the window, you know, tells me you were afraid of the fire. The firing was going. And active shooter protocol is you will take that shooter down, you know, and you will stop that threat. And if that threat is continuing by active gunfire, you have to approach that, you have to engage it, and you have to overcome. And he didn't do that. So he did not follow shooter protocol. You know, at the end of the day, all of this finger pointing does not bring back the lives that were lost on that day and the tragedy that unfolded. And this is the first time the chief is trying to tell his side of the story, whether it frustrates or angers those involved, particularly the parents. And clearly I can hear your frustration tonight. How do the people of Uvalde who are sending their kids back to school in a couple of weeks rebuild trust with a department that they think failed them?
Well, I mean, it certainly doesn't help to have this type of response from an attorney of all people. You know, if he wants to tell his story, he should have given a written statement, which I'm sure he did, as part of his official record as being an officer that was there that day. If he wants to go on and on about, you know, who's to blame and whose fault, and you know what, write a book after you retire. Nobody's going to pick it up and read it. So, you know, the way to move forward is they have to fire him, fire everybody else, as far as I'm concerned, in that small district, and then either absorb the school district into the county sheriffs or the local, you know, police department there in Uvalde, or you hire, you know, a brand new dynamic leader that has character, that has honor and integrity, and you put that person in charge, and, you know, he picks a new team.
They have a long road ahead. And Chief, we are just learning that the school board tonight has just unanimously voted to fire Pete Arredondo as the head of the school education system there, the police chief in Uvalde. This just in, a unanimous vote from the school board. Pete Arredondo has now been fired as the school police chief in the community of Uvalde. Chief Vangeli, we appreciate you as always coming on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Marnie. Have a good night.
You too. And we will continue to follow this situation out of Uvalde. A lot of frustration from the parents in that room who lost children, those who lost parents that day, and teachers. This is certainly not the end of it, and school starts in that community in just a couple of weeks. It's sad, the decision that so many have on their hands, whether they send their kids back into those classrooms after this trust has been fractured for so many. We'll have continued updates here on NewsNation Prime and also on our website, newsnationnow.com. including that 17-page document from the attorneys representing Chief Arredondo. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.